Hi, Michelle Ruddell. Oh, it's so good to see your face, lady.
It's
How
good
are
to see your
you?
face too. I'm great. How are you?
I am well. I'm well. Well, we know each other. We met each other through the Christian Communicators Conference. But I didn't know this part of your story until after the conference, because I got your book at that conference, and it's Welcome to the Club. I'm sorry you're here, which is very intriguing. And we're going to talk about divorce today, and we're going to talk about the heartache and tragedy that you and your husband suffered through the death of your son. And we chatted just a little bit before, because sometimes tragedy in marriages can lead to divorce, or sometimes can accelerate divorce, which is what you told me just happened. I just want to start off by saying that, first of all, this book definitely is blessing people out there. It's a quick read. I encourage people to get it. Again, it's Welcome to the Club. I'm sorry you're here. And I normally don't start off the podcast like this, but I just have to, because it's really very good, and it's very down to earth and easy to digest. So first of all, there's that. And I really believe that your story today is going to bless someone. So I just want to jump right into it. Is that okay?
Let's go. Let's do it.
All right. So Michelle, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and kind of what led you up to what you're doing today.
I am a recently retired high school and middle school teacher, 26 years, taught mostly math. I'm a new grandma.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I retired so that I could speak and write full time. And I've written that one book about the loss of our son. am working on a teacher devotional right now that should be out this summer, and have ideas for a couple more. I'm doing some speaking at conferences and retreats a little bit, would like to do more of that. And since I've been retired, I've started teaching in the jail ministry in our county jail with the team that I know, and teaching a boundaries class in the jail ministry, and working some in the food pantry. I lead a life group in our class and our church, and yeah, that's about it. I live in Central Texas. Been in Texas all my life, all different parts. Dad was highway patrol, so we moved around. I've been divorced since 97, and lost the one son in the car wreck. I have two daughters that are 31 and 29.
So this book was I noticed the copyright was in 2020. So you have sat with this for a while. When you wrote that book, of course, it's 5 years later. So you definitely have sat with this for a while. But just to remind people, so, we're talking about the aftermath of separation and divorce on the podcast, and also the fact that there are lessons to be learned, and there is hope and joy to be found even after something that's this traumatic. And I know that you have so much wisdom, and you have certainly learned a lot of these lessons because I've heard you speak. Although I don't always hear you talk about this particular thing that we're going to talk about today. So take us through. So first of all, you lost your son in an accident, and then a divorce followed after that. So take us through the accident and the loss of your son, and then the divorce.
Okay. We married originally, the first time we married in 1985. So, quickly figured out, this is going to start a little bit before the wreck, but we married in 85. It didn't take long to figure out that he was abusive, and that he participated in some activities that I was not willing to participate in. I found myself in a situation where I felt like I was stuck, because you were brought up to believe you don't get divorced. If good Christians don't get divorced. So I thought, well, I'm stuck. Well, when he broke into my parents' house in 1989, he burglarized my parents' house while they were on vacation. And so then what do you do? Because our son was 2, he was going to prison. I had nothing. And so I ended up moving back in with mom and dad. He got out of prison in 1991 and showed up at my work. And he was clean, and he was sober, and I still loved that man. Despite the advice of everybody around me and counselors that I'd seen who said, watch his actions, give him time to see if this is going to be a good change, I just knew that surely he would want his family to be back together, and surely he wouldn't want to risk losing us again, and surely things would be happily ever after.
Yeah,
So
that love doesn't sometimes it doesn't go anywhere.
it doesn't. And I asked my pastor about that one time. I said, why do I still care with everything that's going on? And he said, because when you stood at the altar and you said, for better or for worse, till death do you part, he goes, you meant it and you love him and you can't just turn that off. So in August of 92, we married again. We found out September, October that we were expecting. And then on December the 5th, 1992, we got in the car to drive from our town to another town about 50 miles away to finish Christmas shopping and see my parents and his parents. And we were hit head on by a driver on an icy road, and our son was killed. I laid on the gurney in the emergency room, and they had told me that our son had died. They told me that my husband was clinging to life in the next room, and they didn't know if he was going to live. I kept having to sign consents to do this treatment and that treatment and blood transfusion and this and that. So it was just a repeat of, we don't know if he's going to make it. We need to do this to try to save his life. And I was 12 weeks pregnant when we had the wreck. So I was terrified that I was going to lose the baby.
Yeah.
We didn't know right at first the extent of my injuries, and they turned out to be relatively minor. But my son was gone. I was pretty sure my husband was going to die, and I thought I was going to lose the baby. It was a very rough physical recovery for him. He did recover. He got out of the hospital in February from the wreck in December. He was hospitalized until February and had some injuries that meant he would not be able to go back to the job he'd held before. And as a recovering addict, he was now on strong pain medicine and was never able to get off of that again.
Mm.
Daughter was born in May of 93, healthy. That's where I first experienced this joy and sorrow can coexist, because we had a wreck in December and my son was killed. We buried him. In May, we had a brand new baby girl.
Amazing.
So on the one hand, just overjoyed at the birth of this baby and the fact that she was healthy. And on the other hand, still very much grieving for our son. Then 2 years later, we had another daughter. Valerie was born in 1995. Through that time, the abuse, the physical abuse, the emotional abuse, the mental abuse, every kind of abuse you can put a word in front of, existed in our marriage. That got worse. His adultery got worse. His addiction was worse. There was a pivotal moment where he had told me he wasn't happy anymore. And he wanted me to tell him to leave. And I said, I'm not going to make that decision. Now, at this point, my daughter who was 3, had looked up at me one day and said, is my daddy going to kill you? Because of some of the things she had witnessed. The abuse was severe enough. There were many times I had given up on thinking, is he going to kill me? And just decided, well, when? Which time will it be? But when you hear it from your 3-year-old, it hits different. Mm-hmm. So around that time, he told me, he said, I'm not happy anymore. Do you want me to leave? And I said, you know what I want is for us to love each other, be happy in this marriage, and to raise our daughters together. But the hitting has to stop. And he looked at me, he said, I can't promise you that. He stood up from the table, pushed his chair in, and went to bed. And I had not been much on speaking terms with God. A little bit after the wreck, yes, I asked God for help in the wreck, and I asked God for help in grieving my son, but I was so ashamed of where I found myself. So embarrassed that I had married him again and was now back in this same abusive situation. I felt so tarnished, like that I couldn't come back to God and ask for forgiveness because I had ran right into this mess. That night, I hit my knees in front of the couch and I said, God, I need you to show me what to do, because I know that divorce is not your ideal plan, but living like this isn't either.
Let me just point out that you said something important. It's not your ideal plan. Jesus talks about divorce, and we know it's not the ideal, but God also doesn't want us to be hurt. Certainly not physically, certainly not emotionally or psychologically.
And that's part of the reason divorce is not ideal, is because it's for our protection. But our pastor at my church that just retired said sometimes divorce is the best of several bad options. He said, but divorce is not something that Jesus forgot.
Yeah,
It's not something that can't be restored and redeemed. And there is joy and there is usefulness even after divorce.
absolutely.
So that was January that I hit my knees and said that prayer. Between January and Easter. Easter was on March 31st that year. I'll never remember. This was 1997. And on Easter Sunday, there was an altercation that morning. Fists were used.
On Easter.
On Easter Sunday, yes, because I woke him up at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And he was mad, and there was a beating. It wasn't as bad as I had taken before, but usually after an episode of domestic violence, he would calm down. After this one, he did not. And we were in the kitchen, and he was cooking, and I was the kitchen slave. What he said, I was at his beck and call. His sister was there with her boyfriend. They were coming for Easter dinner. And so there's this incredible tension because he has not calmed down. And at one point, he raises the spatula up like he's going to throw it at me or hit me with it. And I did not hear an audible voice, but in my spirit, it was like, it is time. Get out of here now. And I walked out the front door, and I didn't want to risk getting my vehicle because I'd have to raise the garage door, and that would have made noise, and he would have known. I'd tried to leave before, and he'd either force me back or convince me to come back. So I walked from our house to the convenience store, which was probably 3/4 of a mile. And then I walked from the convenience store to the sheriff's office, which was probably another mile and a half. And I sat on the courthouse steps on Easter Sunday, and I prayed and I asked God if I was supposed to go and file charges, would he please allow me the strength, give me the strength to keep those charges and not drop them the next day, because I'd grown up around law enforcement. I worked kind of parallel to law enforcement. And I know that so many times when women file charges on one day, they drop them the next under threat or under whatever. I didn't want to do that. And after sitting on the courthouse steps for a while and praying, I went into the sheriff's office and I filed charges, and he was arrested. Now, he was on parole for the previous offense. And so after about 2 weeks, his parole was revoked and he was sent to prison. But God provided that escape that day. Because I asked my husband later when he was in jail, I said, why did you not come after me? Because the whole time I was walking, I'm looking over my shoulder and listening for his truck. And he looked at me and he said, Michelle, I never knew you were gone. This is a man who knew where I was every minute of every day. He knew every penny that I spent. He knew every person that I talked to, and he never knew I was gone. For a long time.
For a long time, yeah, because that walk to the convenience store and then the walk to the sheriff's office.
It wasn't fast.
Yeah, I don't know how fast you walk. I don't walk that fast. So that's easily going to be an hour or more.
Easily, yeah. And I wasn't wearing a watch. I don't know what time of day it was, but yeah. And then I sat on the courthouse steps for the longest time. And then it took, when I went into the sheriff's office and filed the charges, then they had to round up the officers. They had to decide who had jurisdiction because we lived right on the edge of the city limits. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want the highway patrol to go because my dad was captain of the highway patrol, and that would have been so that was there was a whole situation there. And then when they came back and they said, okay, we have him in custody, you can go home now. And I looked at him, I said, hey, do you think somebody could give me a ride?
You got your steps in that day.
That day. So, and the kids were safe because my sister-in-law and her boyfriend were there. So the kids were safe. And he was out for about 2 weeks while in the process for the parole to be revoked. And he whined and dined and tried his best to talk me into dropping the charges. And I did not. And then he was picked up and sent to prison, and the divorce was final in August of 97. So, I've seen God be so faithful in protection because he never invited me into his criminal activity. He never invited me into his drug use. My husband, that is, never invited me into those things where I could have ended up in jail. There's so many times I thought I would be dead and I was not. And then for the whole 2-week thing after he was out and we were waiting on the warrant to come out for his parole to be revoked, just protection there. And then restoration of a life free of fear of abuse for me, for my children. God provided in so many ways. There is joy after that. Here we are, 2025, and my children are happy and healthy, and I am happy and healthy. Did not remarry, have not remarried. Didn't know, for a while I was really upset that was not seemed to be in the plan. I thought that would sure be nice, but that has not been in the plan. And now I'm to a point where I'm okay. If that's not in the plan, then this plan is still good.
So I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
The second marriage, do you think that the abuse was worse the second time around?
It got that way. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. There were times when I should have been dead.
Were you afraid when a couple of times here, when he was out before the parole was revoked and he was out, like you said, whining and dining, were you afraid that there was going to be any reciprocity, that he was going to try to get back at you? Because he had to know what was coming. He had to know that he was probably going to go back into jail.
He knew that there was not one episode of violence in that 2 weeks, which
Amazing.
really surprised me. Because normally we did not go that long, but I think he was so convinced that he was going to be able to coerce me into dropping those charges. And I think that's what kept him. He even made us an appointment to go to counseling. I'd been trying for years and he was not interested, but in this 2 weeks we went once. And it didn't go well. So
I just have to say, isn't that interesting? That happened in my relationship too. It's a different relationship, but at the end, let's go to counseling.
Yeah, let's go to counseling. I don't know where he found this counselor. I've had some experience with some excellent counselors who've helped me tremendously. But this one was convinced within about 5 minutes that I had a drinking problem, and that was the reason for everything.
Wow.
Not the best here, but yeah.
Had you filed charges before and dropped them? Okay.
I had lied to the police when they came to the door. I tried to keep secret from my dad. No.
Okay.
And I worked in the driver's license office. So not only did I know the highway patrolman there because of my dad, but I also knew the sheriffs and the city police and all of them because I worked in the driver's license office. And so, how embarrassing would that be to have to call them and say, I need help because I'm being beaten on. And no, I didn't do it. That was the one and only time that I called the police. Walked to the sheriff's office and went in.
How long was he in jail?
Let's see, that was 1997. He got out for a brief time in 1999. He had a couple of supervised visits with the kids. And then before the third supervised visit, he was arrested again for drugs and credit card abuse or credit card theft or something and went back to prison in 1999 or 2000. He got out in 2009, but because I was the victim on his offense report, the parole board asked me, what restrictions would you like to see? So I asked that he not be allowed to live in the county where we live or any adjacent county. And so they sent him to El Paso, which if you're not from Texas, that doesn't mean anything, but I'm in central Texas, like right in the middle. El Paso is like far west, probably 800 miles from here. So it's a very long way. And then he was released to a halfway house there in 2009, and he died in 2012.
Okay. So now let's take the rest of our time here to talk a little bit about your healing and your recovery after the divorce. Because
yes.
I cannot help but think that a lot of the things that you've experienced, including the death of your son, I can't help but think that you had to overcome some things after that divorce. So let's talk about that. What did you experience?
It was really rough when there was an overwhelming sense immediately of freedom. I could go home without somebody being angry at me. I could not have every move questioned, but it took me a while to be able to make decisions. There were days I think you could have asked me, what color do you like, Michelle? And I couldn't have told you because I was so used to watching for his reaction. I did have some very good counselors during that time. I had not been to church in a long time and decided that I didn't think I could go back, but I wanted my children to go. I wanted my kids to be in church. And so I didn't want to be a parent that sent my children to church. So I went with them. But I swore I would not be one of those every time the doors are open people.
Yeah.
I should be telling God what I won't do, right? And he put us in a church and surrounded us with a church family that loved on us and showed me how God forgives and God restores and God redeems. And they reinforced that idea that, Michelle, this abuse was not your fault.
Did you think it was?
Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
I say that. There were times I thought it was, and there were times I thought, this is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is crazy. But yeah, there were times I thought if I was just a better housekeeper, if I was a better cook, if I was a better this, if I was a better that, then he wouldn't do this. I think by the point what time we divorced the second time, I think I'd figured out there wasn't anything I could do. And I wasn't perfect. I don't want that to seem like I was perfect in that marriage either. I was not. I was running from God as fast as I could. And there were times, even after the divorce, that I thought, I've messed up so bad now, what does it matter? But God got my attention through church family and through friends and through one dear friend who started as my counselor and then we ended just as friends. And she pointed the way to me and taught me how to walk as a Christian, and including some behavior that I needed to change.
What behavior was that?
Well, you see, how open can we be here?
We can be very open as you want to be.
I had been divorced twice, and you know that you can't go back and start over with the activity there. So I've already been with men that I wasn't married to, so now what does it matter? And so I had a couple of boyfriends, not at the same time, but I had a couple of boyfriends, and there was activity there that should not have been happening because it was outside of marriage. But I'm still going to church on Sunday. And here's the thing, where we got to be patient with people as they come back in, because not everything changes at once. And I had a friend who loved me enough to say, Michelle, God's word said this behavior is not to be. And if you continue in this behavior, we will not be able to be friends.
Oh, that's
She
bold.
said, we work together. She said, we will work together. We will go to church together. She goes, I still love you. I want you to be the woman that Jesus wants you to be. She said, but the Bible is very clear about associating with people who are sexually immoral. And she said, if you choose to continue this behavior, we don't go to lunch. We don't go out to eat. We don't go get our hair done together. We don't.
Were you offended?
No, I cried. I was terrified of losing her friendship. I was not offended. I knew she was right. And I cried and I cried. And she said, why are you crying? I said, because I can't lose you as a friend. And I said, I'm done. It's over. She said, don't change it for me. Change it because that's what God says. I said, okay, but can I change it for you for now until I can get my mind wrapped around the other? And so that was the end of that. And that was a healing moment, because I learned that I could survive without that kind of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that my joy is in the Lord and I don't need to be chasing after these guys. I remember hearing a speaker one time that said, she quoted that verse out of Isaiah that said, the Lord your maker is your husband. And I went, because I thought, okay, I know God takes care of us, but I want somebody who can change the light bulbs and take the trash out and mow the yard and talk to me. But God began to get my attention through that verse, because He said, Michelle, I just began to think, if you had the perfect husband, Michelle, who was away working somewhere where you didn't see him all the time and you maybe got to talk to him, but you didn't see him, but he was away working for you and he loved you and your children perfectly and knew every need and every desire and was providing the perfect things for you, would you still be mad when you had to take the trash out? And I thought, no, I wouldn't be. And God says, I am that provider. I am that protector. And I know everything about you and I love you and I am taking care of you.
I love that so much.
And it put just a whole new perspective. Okay, it's okay that I'm single. I can depend on God and I can trust him for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it took that was a big step in being content in being single. Big step. But it also was a big step in experiencing joy and going on about life. My counselor friend one time to me, she said, Michelle, I don't know when you're waiting for life to start because this is it.
I've talked to a lot of women, and for many, not for everybody, but for many, there is that either short or long period where you're just with God, where you just need to stop dating. You need to stop putting yourself in this other situation because that's time where we need to be healing and we need to be understanding what true relationship is, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It happened to me too.
And like I say, there were times when I would really ask God for a husband. I also knew though that when I dated, the men that I dated were similar in nature to my ex-husband. And I thought there's something there. I tell people my picker is broke. But so when the girls got to be preteen age, I decided I wasn't going to look and actively seek and try, because the idea of me maybe picking somebody that would be harmful to me or to them was a very real consideration. We moved, the girls and I moved in 2004. We moved from where we lived out close to Lubbock to where we are now in Central Texas. And my parents are here, and they were 11 and 9, I think, when we moved here. That was a big step too, because one of the things I thought, okay, we're moving to a bigger place. There's going to be a man here for me.
Mm-hmm.
And there was not.
Yeah. We can pay people to come mow the lawn. We can we can get a handyman to put the light bulb. There's things that we can do,
The,
or do it
the
ourselves.
new light bulbs, you don't have to change near as often.
That is true.
And I can take the trash out, and I pay somebody to mow the yard. And I actually like mowing the yard better than I like cleaning the house.
Wow. Okay.
But God has been so incredibly faithful and so incredibly present. And his promise to be father to the fatherless, because my girls, from the time they were 3 and 1 to the time they are now 31 and 29, had 2 supervised visits, and then he died. And so God has shown himself faithful. I still sometimes am blown away when I can write something on social media that some people read, or people tell me about they've read my book, or when I have the opportunity to stand on a stage and talk about how good God is. It blows my mind to think where I was, how he protected me, how he pursued me, and how he's brought me back, and how he has redeemed and restored. It's amazing. He's good. And I've started working in the jail ministry, and to hear those women's stories, I could have so easily been there.
Yeah. Yes. So if there's someone out there listening right now, they are either still in an abusive situation or they're just getting out of it, what would you say to them?
For one who is still in that abusive relationship, you need to be safe. You need to find a way to be safe, find a way for your children to be safe. And then, I don't ever want to put myself in a position where I would tell somebody whether to stay married or be divorced. But God does not want you to be abused emotionally, mentally, physically, sexually, any of that. God He made you in his image, and he values you, and he loves you. He does not want you to be abused. And if that behavior is not going to change, you need to do whatever it takes to get yourself safe. For someone who is just coming out of that, how brave, how strong, how loved you are by Jesus. And if you don't have that relationship with Jesus, reach out to one of us. We can help you with that. Find somebody who can help you. Find a support system of church family or counselor or friends who will point you in that direction and teach you how to walk in that singleness, how to walk with Jesus Christ, how to be successful. And somebody said one time, if you're not happy single, you'll never be happy married. And you have to have that contentment. And don't take relationship advice from Michelle Ruddell.
And her picker.
Yeah, and my broke picker. But make sure that you have had time to heal, and make sure that if you are walking with the Lord and he has someone there for you, then that's going to happen.
You were so blessed to have a strong support system at church. And
Yes.
there are going to be some women that are not going to have that, because we know that sometimes divorce is a difficult subject in Christian circles. I want to remind people that if you're not finding it at church, don't run from God. Maybe run from that church and find another one. But just because there is such a thing as church hurt, but God is there for you and he loves you and everything you said, Michelle, but find it somewhere. Find a support. Yes. Pray, ask him to lead you to a new place or to a counselor or to someone where you can find the support that you need.
Right. Yeah. You don't have, there are some churches that use that. They'll use scripture and beat you over the head with it. There are some that do that. Some people in a church will do that when not everybody in the church will do that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what you said is good. Don't run from God. You might need to find a different church, but don't run from God, because think about the people in scripture that he used. The woman at the well, Moses, David, all the people that he used. He doesn't restrict his usage to perfect people. He uses people that have been through hurt. He uses people that have been through hard things and difficulties, and he uses them. And when you cling to him, he's going to heal you and restore you. And then at some point, you're going to be able to reach back and help somebody else going through that.
So good. Michelle, thank you for sharing your story today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I will definitely let people know where to find you, where to find your books in the show notes. But I think you've blessed this podcast so much. And even though I knew you, I didn't know all of the pieces of you. So I thank you for sharing it today.
Thank you.